So Addie Benito is a clinical endocrinologist with an interest in the interaction of environmental factors, nutrition, environmental pollutants, and stress with the endocrine system. She's passionate about educating her patients and giving them practical tools to improve well-being. She's board certified in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism. She attended medical school in Spain and completed a residency in internal medicine at Pennsylvania Hospital at the University of Pennsylvania Health System and a fellowship in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also completed her 2-year fellowship in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, where she is guest faculty. She's a certified meditation teacher and is also currently studying herbal medicine at the David Winston Center for Herbal Studies. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Addie Benito.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I hope we'll have fun during this webinar. I want to talk a bit about what stress is and how it works in our bodies. What are the effects of chronic or constant stress physically? We'll talk a bit about this cortisol and circadian rhythm and how and why is it important to keep it as is. And we're going to then focus on nutrition as well as some botanicals for stress. So what is stress? So our bodies are made to live in balance and to thrive. We adapt to external circumstances to bring this balance back. So we adapt. That's a very key word. When the external circumstances are perceived as excessive or as a threat, our bodies respond in a particular way, that is a generalized way, and that's what we call stress. So stress is a state where our brain interprets our current situation as either excessive or threatening. So we might say things like, this is too much, I can't take it, I'm overwhelmed. And then our bodies will react in this generalized way, in this stress response, we call it. So stress is common, whether we talk about safety, economic, peer pressure, isolation, job, lack of social support. Any of those affect about 450 million people all over the world. So stress, even just the perception of stress, is going to trigger a cascade of signals that are designed to bring us back to balance. That's the adaptation. That's how we adapt. But if we have chronic stress, that hurts us because that cascade never stops. There are two other words that are sometimes used when we talk about stress. One is burnout. And burnout is defined as an emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion, which happens as a consequence of prolonged stress. Burnout has been described, I think, in almost any profession you can think of, definitely in teachers, medical providers, caregivers of any kind. The other term you might sometimes see is something called vital exhaustion. And that is characterized by excess fatigue, lack of energy, increased irritability, sleep disturbances, and demoralization. And they're important because both burnout and vital exhaustion will make people more likely to have heart disease. So it's not without consequences. So what is the stress system? What is this generalized response that we're talking about? That is guided by this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis. So under normal stress, our body will perceive the stress up in the brain, in an area of the brain called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus will send signals to the pituitary, and the pituitary to the adrenal glands, and that makes cortisol. And cortisol then, this is how it happens. So you perceive stress in the brain, you activate the stress system. The cortisol gets released in the body, right here in the adrenal glands. Cortisol feeds back into the brain, activates this area of the brain called the hippocampus, and that shuts down the stress system and you go back into balance. That's a normal response of the stress system. However, when our bodies are under chronic stress, that response is persistent. And that will lead to things like inflammation, hormonal changes. So in women, we may shut down our estrogen production. We might lose our cycles. In men, they might lose their testosterone production. And either men or women might actually not have enough thyroid hormone at the cellular level. There's also the development of high blood pressure and heart disease, obesity, diabetes, leaky gut, and ulcers. All these have been linked to this chronic or constant stress. Whether you're going to get one or the other or more than one, it really depends on your particular body and your particular genetics and how vulnerable you are to stress response. So we talked a bit about how stress, right, whatever the stressor might be, is going to trigger this HPA axis, this cortisol system. The other part that we didn't talk about is actually the sympathetic system. And this is part of what we call the autonomic nervous system. And the sympathetic system is, if you think of the fight or flight response, right? That's what that is. If you are in the other part, which is the parasympathetic, that you rest and digest. But sympathetic to adrenaline. That's when you're like, you know, really fight or flight. So both cortisol and this sympathetic, this adrenaline system, are going to affect your tissues in the body, and they cause something called metabolic syndrome. So they'll produce insulin resistance, which is a precursor to diabetes. Sarcopenia means that you lose muscle. They cause fat storage around your organs. That's what it means by visceral obesity. Cholesterol, triglycerides, lipids issues, fat issues, high blood pressure, and then inflammation in your blood vessels. That's what that means. And of course, there are many other, again, consequences of this stress system. It can also depress the immune system. Again, it can affect your sleep, your appetite, and then fear and anxiety are common. And that's from another system that I didn't put here that will trigger fear and anxiety. So a lot of different responses. And again, whether you have one or the other really depends on who you are. This is how the sympathetic nervous system causes metabolic syndrome. So, and I think it's easier if you focus on the graph, on this figure. So if you look at, you know, these two systems, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and how they affect under stress, what happens in the thorax, in the abdomen, and in the muscles. So we're going to start with the abdomen. So when you're under stress, what happens is your insulin goes up and your abdominal fat goes up. So the gray one is actually the normal, right? This is normal. This is when you're under stress. High insulin, high abdominal fat. In the thorax, your blood pressure goes up. And in the muscle, your glucose uptake goes down. So your muscles are not as able to pick up glucose as they would normally without stress. I want to show you this figure of how cortisol works in our bodies and how we make cortisol throughout the day. So the green is a normal production of cortisol. So we have a big peak of cortisol in the morning when we first get up. And then we have a little peak sometime in the afternoon, right? Early noon, around noon, we have one. And then as the day goes by, we just lower our cortisol. And by the time you go to bed, you should have almost no cortisol detectable in your body. You have it, but it's very little. When you're under stress, most of us respond in this way, up here in the red. So our cortisol is up, and it's up all the time. There are some particular situations when actually our cortisol will go down, and there's a hypoactivity, so a low activity of cortisol in our body. Those are not as common. There's particular situations or diseases actually that can cause that. But most of us are actually going to do this up here. So remember this, we go up in the morning, and at night we should be really all the way down. I found this very interesting. It's a recent article, but it's not the first article published on the timing of meals and how affects your cortisol production. So if you have a dinner that is considered a late dinner, so if you eat around 10 p.m., assuming that you're going to bed at 11, so eating at 10 versus eating at 6 p.m. If you eat at 10, you're going to increase your cortisol, you're going to increase your insulin, you're going to increase your morning sugars, and you're going to encourage fat storage. So in the long term, if you eat late dinners consistently, that is going to increase your chance at gaining weight. So something about not eating dinner too late is a nice way not to make your cortisol too high, right? So you're under stress and you're eating late at night, you're going to make your cortisol even higher. There is a significant impact of sleep on stress and of stress on sleep. And then nutrition has, goes intermingled with the two of them. So let's talk about the bad news first. So probably we all know stress affects your sleep, but poor sleep also increases anxiety. Just having poor sleep is going to make you more anxious. Just one night of poor sleep lowers your morning cortisol and will increase your evening cortisol. Remember our little slide before when we talk about cortisol being high in the morning and low in the evening? If you sleep poorly, you're going to reverse that. You're going to have low cortisol in the morning, high in the evening. So you'll be tired in the morning and you'll have all your energy in the evening. That's when you'll wake up. In addition, when you have poor sleep, that increases your appetite. Not just in general, it's going to make you crave things like that are sweet, starchy, and salty. And that's because these foods will activate some centers in the brain called reward centers, which transiently are going to decrease your stress. Okay, so important to recognize that when you sleep poorly, you have cravings for these foods, but it's only transient that they're going to make you feel better. When you eat foods that are very rich in sugars, just plain sugars, that's going to make you wake up at night very frequently. So now for the good news. If you get more sleep, you tend to eat more vegetables. That's really cool, isn't it? On the other hand, if you eat foods that are higher in fiber, that's going to improve your deep sleep. Now that's really interesting because especially in women, as we get into menopause, we lose deep sleep. So if we eat foods that are high in fiber, that's going to improve our deep sleep. In addition, there's a recent study showing that if you eat foods that are high in fiber when you're in menopause, you have lower hot flashes. So that's another good reason to have high fiber in your diet. As we said before, if you eat dinner not too close to your bedtime, you're going to improve your sleep, but also your metabolism. And if although we should be avoiding eating foods that are high, rich in sugar, eating things that are healthy, carbohydrate rich, so your complex carbohydrates, or your sweet potatoes, or even quinoa or brown rice actually, might help your sleep, which is an interesting study. Just want to mention a bit about coffee. Coffee does increase your alertness and it's going to increase your mood. It elevates your mood. Coffee does stimulate cortisol production. The effect of coffee on cortisol could last up to 6 hours. So if you're somebody who's not under stress, it might be okay to drink coffee throughout the day. Probably not even. But if you drink coffee, you're going to keep that cortisol high, which is why many people, when they talk about being under stress, they say that you should limit your coffee intake. So let's move to nutrition. How do we support our body through nutrition? And I don't mean that that's all you have to do, right? Stress has many other ways that we can approach it, and we should approach it. How we nourish not only our body but our soul, our spirit. Whether we do meditation, mindfulness, social connections are really important actually to combat stress. And exercise, Tai Chi, Qigong, there are studies on those, yoga as well. So many other strategies to help stress. Within nutrition, we know that these high monounsaturated fatty acids, which are your plant-based fats, your avocados, your nuts, your seeds, your oils, olives, and dark chocolate, they improve your stress. Those I'm not going to talk much because it's really not a lot of research. There's, I think, just one paper that I found, but I'm going to talk about the other ones as we move on. So fruits and vegetables. The more fruits and the more vegetables you eat, the better your normal cortisol rhythm is. So again, remember that nice big spike in the morning and your lower spike in the evening. That's what, when you eat more fruits and more vegetables, you go back to that normal rhythm. And if you have a normal cortisol rhythm, you actually are able to face your day a bit easier. Omega-3 fatty acids also improve already a cortisol pattern that is abnormal. So again, when you're already flipped, you already switched that cortisol pattern, omega-3 fatty acids can help you bring back cortisol pattern back to normal. They also improve your mood. They improve that circadian rhythm, and they will prevent stress. So this is something you can actually take if you know that you're going to be under some stressful situation. So like, even if you have a kid who's undergoing some stress or some exams, you can make sure that they have enough omega-3 fatty acids in their diet. Vitamins and antioxidants, especially B vitamins, C, A, E, and then selenium and glutathione, they work because they're either cofactors in this molecular cascade that produces cortisol, or because they have an effect as an antioxidant. Vitamin C, the study actually used a very high dose of vitamin C. So it was 3,000 milligrams per day. And that improved the response to stress. Now that's pretty hard to do with diet. On the right, I put a few foods or the top 10 foods, thought to be highest in vitamin C. And even if you eat one of those, each of those per day, you don't really get to 3,000 per day. I'm not advocating that you have 3,000 milligrams per day. I'm just saying this is what the study showed. I think vitamin C in excess can also have some detrimental effects, can cause diarrhea, can cause kidney stones if you're predisposed to them. So I'm not advocating that you do this. I'm just saying this is what the study showed. And, you know, you can eat your fruits and vegetables because overall we know that better to help your response to stress. If you mix vitamin C with B vitamins, that also lowers your stress, but also lowers your fatigue that is due to stress. So that's actually pretty cool. B vitamins are important because they will improve your mood, your stress, your sleep, and your fatigue. They improve mood mostly because they stimulate a neurotransmitter that we call GABA. And GABA is actually quite relaxing and quieting. And GABA actually helps feedback into that cortisol cascade, and it tries to put a slow break on cortisol. In addition, B3, and in particular B3 and B6, are helpful for sleep. So you see some of the foods here, some of them here, same with B6. So, you know, enough to choose what could work for you to have enough B3 and B6. Now, just a word of caution, if you are doing this, not through diet, but through supplements, I don't think B vitamins should be taken at night. I think they'll wake you up, or they could wake you up. So they should be taken in the morning. Probiotics have actually quite a bit of data on helping improve mood. There are also some studies showing that they lower when you have too much cortisol in your system. They also improve your blood glucose, and they lower insulin resistance. And in particular, milk-derived probiotic foods, they also have an effect, just like B vitamins, on this GABA neurotransmitter that is very common in the brain. There's a, I guess you will call this a phospholipid, phosphatidylserine, which is part of the cells in the brain have phosphatidylserine on the outside of the cell. And you find it naturally in egg yolks, white beans, soybeans, should be soybeans, no soy, I mean soybeans, organ meats, and then mackerel and herring. Phosphatidylserine will lower your cortisol and will enhance memory. So there are three categories that herbalists will talk about. One is adaptogens, and those are herbs that help the body adapt to stress. Others are nervines, which are herbs that calm that fight or flight response, that adrenaline. And then antioxidants. Remember that when we trigger that cortisol cascade, our body responds with inflammation. So we want to use antioxidants to bring the inflammation down. So within the adaptogens, holy basil, which you see pictured here, which belongs to the mint family, holy basil has been found to lower anxiety, improve memory, and help your sleep quality. It's a lovely, beautiful adaptogen that you can actually put as pestos. You can actually drink it as a tea. I'm sure there are many other ways you can use holy basil. Mushrooms, they have something called beta-glucans, and beta-glucans help your liver and your glucose regulation. They also have selenium, they have zinc, and they have glutathione. Glutathione and selenium are both antioxidants. And of the mushrooms that we think are medicinal, I've included shiitake and maitake because this you can actually find in supermarkets and just, you know, grill them and roast them and however you want to put them in soups, anything you want. So nervines, within that category of herbs that help you lower that fight or flight response, you have chamomile, helps you relax, sleep, is also calming to the gut. Linden flower is another nervine that also is very soothing to the gut. Lemon balm lowers cortisol. It also enhances this GABA, this neurotransmitter that is very common. So it helps you relax and sleep. Lavender induces relaxation and helps sleep. And passion flower, it improves sleep quality in what I call the monkey mind. So if you cannot go to sleep because you just keep thinking and thinking and thinking, passion flower is your friend. Within the antioxidants foods, and again, we've talked about a lot of the foods before, these are just herbs that you can use as antioxidants as well. You can use hibiscus, you can use hawthorn, you can use green tea, and you can use peppermint. And I'm sure there are many others that I didn't include. Hope this was helpful and you all enjoy it. Thank you.
This was really informative and helpful. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Everybody be well and stay safe.
Thank you everybody.